What's up, Scyushi Squad? We back in more Trove, and today we're gonna be talking about this week's badge notes. Yes, that's right. The Shadow Hunter rework is here, ladies and gentlemen, which means that there is a rework to almost every class in the game. It's awesome. However, I do have to give a little disclaimer to let you guys know on console that the update is currently on PC only, and we have no idea when it's going to end up showing up on consoles. Okay, so anyways, this update is pretty substantial because not only does it end up making the Shadow Hunter the overall best character in the game, I would say. I want to be very clear that it's kind of an all-around jack-of-all-trades character that doesn't necessarily falter in any specific category. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best in all categories, but the fact is that it's definitely up there. And a lot of the classes ended up getting reworks on top of the Shadow Hunter, more so a rebalancing. So we're going to constantly refer to it as rework throughout this video, but generally speaking, just keep in mind that a lot of classes ended up having their damage numbers increased. Some of them ended up getting a nerf though, but let's get right into it. And before I forget, if you're new to Trove, you can use the sign up link down in the description, and then anything you buy out of the cash shop, I'll make a percentage of that sale. It's an awesome way you can help me with the cost of living. Speaking of the cash shop, lots of you guys keep asking about the Shadow Hunter costume. This is related to the Renewus pack, which is only available during certain times of the year. I just wanted to cross that off my list of things to respond to you guys about. So first and foremost, let's talk about the Shadow Hunter rework itself. So they say there's a big write-up talking about how they wanted to change how a lot of the abilities end up working and blah 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 blah, but generally speaking, we're going to end up just talking about the abilities themselves. The passive, Dark Whispers. Nearby enemies periodically receive a shadow mark, increasing damage done to them by 5%, as well as making them visible through walls. So that buff actually used to be substantially higher. I think they lowered it to 5% from 15% damage buff or something. So when the Shadow Hunter uses a basic attack on shadow marked enemies, a small explosion is triggered at the target, dealing 100% damage and granting the class one seeker. So here's the weird thing is they don't seem to be going into all of the details, which we will not necessarily go into all of those today because otherwise it would just take way too long. But I find it very strange that they're talking about, here's the small explosion damage that deals 100% damage, when they don't give us the example of what it used to do, because that explosive effect was something that was always available. So the other thing too I want to clarify is that it says by damaging an enemy that has shadow mark on them will end up gaining a seeker, which is not entirely true. You do not gain seekers as often as you should. What is a seeker? Well, we'll end up getting into that in a moment at the training dummy. But anyways, moving on, it says additionally, when dodging, the Shadow Hunter will gain a movement speed boost for a short time. This boost is refreshed when dodging if already active. So you can basically just do this, and then the boost you can see in the top left, it's very, very tiny. It lasts only a short while, but you can boost again to end up refreshing it. The boost is going to end up giving us a 40% movement increase, which is very, very nice. So that already is great for the Shadow Hunter. Here's our training dummies. We'll use these guys in a minute. So basic attack, this is without the class gem, okay? So basic shot damage increased to 375%, sorry, up from 250%. Projectile size has also been increased, and additionally, basic attacks can now shoot through walls and enemies. Again, this is without the class gem. So with the class gem, basic attacks become a rapid fire stream of arrows, usual stuff. Increased damage to 200%, up from 100%, and additionally added the ability to shoot through walls. You can't shoot through enemies with the class gem ability, which is disappointing, but it does shoot through walls now, which is really, really nice. New primary ability, the Shadow Seeker. So this is going to end up being your right click ability, which you can see I can't actually do anything right now, even though I'm spamming right click. So the way that this works is requires one seeker to use. So on use, launches all seekers that hunt the closest target and explode on contact, dealing 250% damage. The Shadow Hunter can store up to 5 Seekers at a time, and the damage scales with the number of Seekers available when fired. And then it ends up giving an example of 350%, 450%, 600%, 750%, 900%. More Seekers equals more better. Shadow Seekers also deal increased crit damage. Now, as far as I understand, the way that they explain this tells me that by having the maximum amount of Seekers on you, they should all be dealing 900% damage, but that doesn't happen, or at least it didn't end up happening on the test server. I haven't really tried it out too much on the live server, but essentially you have an enemy tagged with Shadow Mark, and then when we shoot them, if it would stop being glitchy, you'll see this box kind of fall out of them. You see it's sitting right here, actually. It's just that the club world is just so laggy that it barely works. And then they go into my character. This is just how it's coded. And then we get these little arrows on top of our head. So that's the amount of Shadow Seekers that we have, which I always often refer to as Shadow or Seeker missiles, just because of Metroid games. But essentially you can store up to 5 of them, and then what's going to happen is going to be very, very brief and very quick. Okay, so I want you to keep an eye on this. I'm going to right click, and you're going to see a bunch of small video effects items go on the ground, right? So those are our Seekers right there. And then they explode on the enemy, which, funny enough, they actually destroyed my target. Did it go into my inventory? I think it killed it. Like, okay. Well, it's probably because I have the biome open, so that's probably why it got deleted. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. Come to think of it, I actually have a training dummy right here, so prime example. So we shadow mark it, we shoot it with our shots here, we end up getting the Seekers on us, and then we shoot them out of us, and you can just barely see them on the ground go and explode into the enemy. They're very jank, and frankly speaking, I wish that they would tweak the Shadow Seekers to work a little bit more consistently, but what are you gonna do? So Sun Snare, which is your, the little trap that you end up throwing down, the way that this works is throws a trap that detonates on proximity, dealing 350% damage and stunning nearby enemies. Now has an increased area effect and applies Shadow Mark to targets, which I think it always did that, but I don't know what the original damage was, because again, they didn't give us an example. So new ultimate ability. So this is the big thing. This is what makes the Shadow Hunter do insane amounts of damage. So the ultimate ability, Sacred Arrow, will fire a large damaging arrow of energy that deals 450% damage every second for 7 seconds. The first contact arrow will deal 550% damage. And this arrow pierces through targets and blocks. As long as the ability button is held down, you will continuously fire arrows until you run out of energy. It slows the player's movement greatly, and the damage over time effect can be stacked multiple times on the same target. The ability also now has a 45-second cooldown, which is actually quite ridiculously long. But I can end up doing a single shot, and you can see it tags the enemy, and then there's the damage over time, or the dot, as we refer to. Or you can end up doing this, where you just hold the button down and you just keep shooting it. You'll see my energy in the bottom right draining. But my first shot ends up doing a crazy amount of damage, and then you can see those are all the dots doing additional damage, which is literally what ends up making Shadow Hunter so god tier in terms of its damage, because that ability right there, it is affected by your martial emblem. So every time I consume a flask, the damage over time would end up increasing the damage. It's very, very cool. So the tactical shot hidden effect, this is on your crystal rings, by the way, has been replaced by tactical seekers. So there's actually a new hidden effect ability that unfortunately I don't have on this ring. Disappointing. So when enemies take damage from the Shadow Hunter's Sacred Arrow, a Shadow Seeker will fire from the Shadow Hunter and attack the closest target. Now, that single-handedly is the best and only real hidden effect that you want to end up using on the Shadow Hunter, which is why I'm so disappointed that my C4 ring doesn't actually have it, because that just increases your DPS, your damage over time, your damage per second just gets increased by the fact that you're having Shadow Seekers shoot out of you. Now, a quick review of the character is, as I said previously, it's overall, I would say, the best character in the game. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not saying that Shadow Hunter is the best class that you could possibly use. I'm just saying for any given scenario in the game, which there's only 3 different scenarios in this game. There is Leviathans, Delves, and speed farming. And Shadow Hunter doesn't necessarily falter in any of those categories. Certain characters, like let's say Ice Sage, for example, not to say that you can't try to speed farm with the Ice Sage, but generally speaking, Ice Sage belongs in the Delves mostly and on Leviathans, right? I think we can all agree on that. But with Shadow Hunter, it kind of does everything well enough that it could just be your single-handed main for everything, frankly speaking. Now, where does the Shadow Hunter shine, you might ask? Well, with speed farming, the movement speed boost isn't significant enough that I would say it's like top 3 for the fastest class or anything like that. But Shadow Hunter's got a really good time to kill because, you know, basically the speed farming is broken into 2 categories, which is how fast can you travel to the next dungeon, or how fast can you kill the enemies within the dungeon. So the kill time is perfectly fine. The movement speed is what is... I don't want to say it's lacking because I don't want people to have the impression that the Shadow Hunter is slow per se, but if I would compare the Shadow Hunter as a speed character versus Lunar, Lancer, or Neon Ninja, Lancer and Neon Ninja are way faster and arguably can defeat enemies at the same, if not a little bit faster than the Shadow Hunter can right now. But my point is that you can definitely use the Shadow Hunter effectively in Primal Uber worlds and stuff like that. But where does the character end up shining? Delves and Leviathans. Oddly enough, the Shadow Hunter, especially with its ultimate, has some of the highest damage in the game. That is definitely a top 3 category, maybe even top 2, maybe even number 1. But I still gotta end up testing out some things to end up confirming that 100%. But most of all, the reason why Shadow Hunter ends up being, you know, lifted up so high into the heavens in terms of its damage is not only just because of the way that the damage numbers scale, but also because of the fact that a lot of the Yara characters ended up getting nerfed. So anyways, let's move on here. Obviously Shadow Hunter is the biggest portion of this update, but there is a lot more things that we got to talk about today. And particularly just for foreshadowing, I want to say that Boomeranger mains and Barb mains, you guys are going to be happy. So there is also combat updates. So Trove combat is now conducted with 64-bit precision for health and damage. No longer will bosses be limited to a mere 2 billion health, because basically the whole game's combat code was 32-bit, which, never mind all the computer jargon, it basically just means that the number value of enemy health and so on and so forth could only go up to a certain value, but now they've essentially... Well, I was going to say they doubled it, but no, they made it like go to the moon. Like they can basically end up making enemies scale to be much more difficult without having to compensate our damage as much with the darkness and light stat, which is the armor and armor penetration stat of the game. So opponents in Delves will no longer rely on somewhat random damage reduction to suppress damage, although deeper bosses are still protected by the darkness or armor stat. Abyssal and nightmare depths of Delves should have a more accurate feedback on how much damage is actually being done, because essentially just because of the way that the game was coded, it ended up limiting a lot of things. So floating combat text now shows more digits, meaning that we can actually have over 100 million damage numbers now, which is really cool. Space has additionally been added between the digits of floating combat text to make them slightly easier to read. They also end up crediting a mod that ended up basically inspiring the thing. I don't know why they didn't end up just putting the mod directly into the game or something. Like, they have spaces between the numbers, but I'm still using the mod, as you can see, that puts the dot between the numbers, because I don't know, maybe it's my eyes or something. I can't really notice the space that much, especially when the damage numbers go off so quickly. But anyways, that's the combat updates. So there's additional class updates, and this is, oh boy, there's a lot of changes here, guys. So let's take a peek at these. So first of all, I'm going to end up categorizing all of these with timestamps so you can kind of go through them all. Boomeranger. So the basic, let me actually swap to the Boomeranger just so I can give you guys, well, I won't give you examples, but I'll just tell you. The bow's basic attack has been increased to 240%, up from 140%. Sword basic attack is at 270, up from 170. Big bomb damage increased to 75, whatever the heck that means. Bach Bomb damage increased to 800%, up from 285%. What? So that means that the Bach Bomb damage is now essentially doing what the Boomeranger used to do, which is triumphant. Like, let's just do a word of applause here for the Boomeranger mains out there, because now you can actually main this character. It's completely viable and it's beautiful. So they fixed a bug where minions summoned by the Bach Bomb did not deal as much damage as the minions summoned by the Mysterious Urn. So now it should be universal. Your minions do X amount of damage. Boomerang damage increased to 450%, up from 275. Mysterious Urn explosion damage increased to 800%, up from 600. Mini bombs summoned by the Mysterious Urn do 650% damage, up from 400. They didn't end up reducing the knockback of what was important. They did reduce the Mysterious Urn's knockback, but devs, if you're watching this, you need to end up nerfing the bombs that come out of the Mysterious Urn, because each individual bomb has knockback tied to it, and when the urn triggers all of the bombs at once, that's what most of all ended up knocking enemies too far back. But hey, at least they're trying. Bach Bow is now less effective on delve blocks, which Bach Bow is the hidden gem or hidden crystal ring effect, sorry, that basically, or blast bow. Wait, Bach Bow? I think they're saying Bach Bomb, but maybe they mixed it up with Blast Bow. So basically, the Blast Bow is the best hidden effect, where it makes your shots do explosion damage, which basically is just more damage over time. So if you have a crystal ring with that effect, then you're going to be using the Boomeranger as a bow character, and then if you don't, you could end up using it as a melee character. It's up to you. Fixed an issue where the overstuffed urn hidden effect was also always active, even when not using a polished ring to get the effect. So that's hilarious. Now let's move on to the Gunslinger. This is sad. So Gunslinger was already kind of poop at this point, frankly speaking, and for some reason they nerfed it even more, which I don't understand. So a full charge shot bullet damage has been decreased to 325%, down from 400%, and the explosion damage has been reduced to 275, down from 350. Partial charge shot explosion damage has been reduced to 175%, down from 200, and the basic attack has been decreased to 120%, down from 133. Now, I mean, I don't know. It's okay, but I don't really understand why they ended up nerfing the Gunslinger, because frankly speaking, Gunslinger was kind of at this point where it was, once upon a time, it was the strongest class in the game, and they slowly ended up bringing all the other classes up to the standard that was the Gunslinger, and I feel like they've done that, and a lot of classes in a lot of ways have actually superseded the Gunslinger, so having these nerfs to the class is just a little bit confusing to me. But anyways, let's move on to the Fae Trickster. There was a few of you guys asking me in the stream yesterday about the Fae Trickster. They nerfed and buffed it at the same time, right? Or did they? No, they buffed it. Sorry, I was reading the wrong thing. So basic attack without ego boost active has been increased to 300%, up from 220, which basically ego blast is or ego boost, sorry, is when you don't take damage for a little while, you end up getting increased damage. So now when ego boost is active, you do 650%, up from 610. Glitter bomb damage has been increased to 675%, up from 450. Let's go. And then increase the duration of the ego boost debuff when hit to 4 times, up from 2. That is explained very, very poorly, and I don't know why they say it's a debuff. So basically, when you end up getting the ego boost, it's basically don't take damage for like a few seconds, and then you end up getting increased damage, right? And normally you could get tagged by an enemy, like I think once, and then you would end up losing the effect. But then there was this class gem ability that ended up increasing that, so it would require an additional hit, right? So now they've changed it, so they're not very clear about this, but I think that the default is you can get hit 4 times now before you'll end up losing the effect, which I assume means that the class gem would essentially double that, right? Unless it just adds 1 additional hit to it. I'm not exactly sure. Fae mains, you can correct me in the comments or something. But anyways, let's move on to the Ice Sage. The Ice Sage is the character that got both a buff and a nerf at the same time. So Bear with me. Don't worry, the nerfs aren't that bad. Well, one of them is, but basic attack damage decreased to 225%, down from 275. It's not awful. The gem's pain freeze explosion damage. So, you know, when you end up shooting things and it goes like that effect. So that has had the damage decrease to 625%, down from 750. Ice Sage mains are just puking their guts out right now. Ice Crash, which is your right click ability, damage has increased to 750%, up from 630. So that's really good, because this is actually a very, very good ability in the Delves, just because of crowd control, and now even more so, right? The Big Chill, which is your number one ability that freezes all the enemies, has had the damage increased to 400%, up from 315. Whatever, not a big deal. Now let's get into the real sadness right here. So I need to emotionally prepare for this, because the Chloromancer nerfs are insane, dude. Okay, so granted, Chloromancer was pretty much the strongest boss killer in the game, right? I don't think anyone's going to end up arguing that. But the thing is, you know, the reason why I'm so disappointed at these nerfs is because the Chloromancer only really shined as a boss killer. It wasn't very good for delves, and it wasn't very good for speed farming. So it fit into a very, very niche category, and now unfortunately that's been taken down a few notches. Not to say Chloromancer still isn't powerful, so don't worry if you're absolutely in love with the Chloromancer, you can still main it. It's just you're probably not going to end up being the best anymore. So green Gatling damage decreased to 100%, down from 160. The mini bloom damage decreased to 375, down from 450. Mini blooms have a lower chance to spawn, 10%, down from 20%. Big green Gatling, so this is when you're in your ultimate form, or use your ult and whatever. So the big green Gatling's damage has decreased to 225%, down from 380. Ooh, and the big green Gatling cooldown is now 12 seconds, up from 8, and can now only have 2 out at a time, down from 3. Oh, this is so sad, dude. Like, okay, well, there's a little bit more. So the big Leafy Lasher damage has also been decreased to 200% damage, down from 250. Oh boy, let's try to change the topic here and talk about something more positive, which is the candy barb. Oh boy, you thought the Boomeranger rework was nice? Get ready for the candy barb, because this is great. So, look at this. Oh my god. Basic attack damage increased to 325%, up from 185, and slightly increased the attack size as well. Look at this. Look at that. I don't even have this character built, and I'm doing like 10 mil each hit. Good lord. So the vanilla swirlwind damage has increased to 700%, up from 650, and the energy cost has been reduced to 55, down from 60. Knockback has also additionally been reduced. So that's really cool. That's basically our vanilla swirl, our spin attack. So you can essentially cast it a little bit more often. It does more damage, and the lack of knockback is very, very nice. Sugar Crash damage has increased. Yes, that's right. The ultimate, wait, not the ultimate. Sorry, the number one. I'm an idiot. The ultimate did end up getting a buff, but we're talking about the one. Jesus. So it had its damage increased to 650%, up from 450. My lord, look at this. Like, good gravy. Scoop and Gloop gem damage. Why does it say Scoop and Gloop? Okay, so I guess that's just the overall damage of the leap attack for the Sugar Crash, even though this is essentially the same thing anyway. Anyways, Scoop and Gloop has had its damage up to 650%, up from 450. So just generally speaking, whether you have your class gem or not, you're going to be doing the 650% damage. So the ultimate, the Eris Crom damage, has been increased to 1,675%, up from 1,500%, which is, or 1,500%. Sorry, I read that weird. But yeah, we didn't necessarily need more damage with this ultimate, but that's pretty darn cool. Rage Candy, which basically you can have the Rage Candy end up getting out your ultimate and so on and so forth, gives increased movement speed and attack speed, and additionally will now buff physical damage. Means that this guy goes very, very good with a lot of classes in the game, but now especially with the Shadow Hunter. So let's move on to the Neon Ninja. So I don't know why they buffed this class considering they nerfed some of the others, but okay, let's get into it. So basic attack damage has increased to 285%, up from 100%. Stasis blade damage, which is going to end up being your number one, your dash, so that move right there. Stasis blade damage has increased to 450%, up from 250%. Good lord. Final technique, which is your ultimate ability, has had its damage increased to 550%, up from 300. All I can do is just shake in excitement, my lord. So Shining Star damage, this is without your class gem, by the way, so we're not using this very often, but it had its damage increased. So at level 1, it does 315%, sorry, up from 250. At level 2, it does 475, up from 450. And at level 3, it does 875, up from 750. But more importantly, you guys want to know about the class gem itself. So the heuristic Hack Star damage has also been increased. So at level 1, it does 275 versus the original 250. At level 2, it does 475, up from 450. And at level 3, it does 1000%, up from 950. The critical damage bonus on level 3 has also been decreased, so it kind of compensates. But still, Neon Ninja just got stronger. Lord only knows why. Let's talk about the Knight. So the Knight, where's the costume? I'll just put this on in the meantime. The Knight has had a considerable buff, which I think Knight mains are going to be very happy about. Knight, generally speaking, is a class that I feel a lot of people sleep on, but Knight always ended up doing a decent amount of damage with this class gem ability. But now they've made all of the other abilities a lot more viable. So movement speed when attacking has increased, so just movement speed while you're attacking is going to end up being a lot better. Basic attack damage is increased to 450%, up from 250%. Retribution effect has been added. So every time the Knight takes damage, they will store up Retribution that increases the damage of their next attack. This can stack up to 3 times, dealing additional damage per stack. Basic attacks reduce targets' outgoing damage by up to 10%, and additionally attacks refresh this debuff. So if you got an enemy that's damaging everybody and you got a Knight just wailing away on it, it basically means that that enemy is going to be dealing 10% less damage, which would be pretty cool if every enemy in the game didn't one-shot you, because every single character in the game is built towards DPS, which means that we don't have any health. Damage reduction of the passive has been increased to 10%, up from 5%, so that's what we just mentioned, basically. The smash damage, which is going to end up being our right click that nobody ends up using, but maybe now you will, because the smash damage is at 850%, up from 600%. Duration of the smash is taunt, because it taunts enemies, believe it or not. It has been brought to 4.5 seconds, up from 3. Charge damage, this is your number 1 when you... I don't think it's the class gem ability, it's basically just the charge itself, right? So charge damage increased to 650%, up from 450. Duration of the charge's taunt is up to 2 seconds, up from 1. And now the Spirit Squire, so this is actually the class gem effect, has had its damage increased to 850, up from 800. This is in percents, by the way. And the duration of Iron Will, which is your ultimate, has been increased to 12 seconds, up from 10. And damage reduction of Iron Will is now at 25%, up from 10%. That's actually a pretty good tanky ability. I'm honestly shocked. So now let's swap over to the Vanguard. So the Vanguard has had subtle but very nice changes. The melee basic attack damage has increased to 385%, up from 300. While the third attack, this is going to end up being the 1-2-3 uppercut, has had its damage increased to 450%, up from 400. The ranged basic attack has had its damage increased to 280, up from 240. And the third attack from the range as well is at 450%, up from 400, which Honestly, I feel like the range needed to be buffed a lot more in order to end up being viable, but at least it's a thing, you know, like you Vanguard mains out there are happy to know that your character ended up essentially getting a lot stronger. So next is going to end up being the Dino Tamer. So the Dino Tamer, most of all, they seem to focus on not being in your ult, which that's kind of the thing about this update is they ended up making the weak links of all the characters kind of a lot better. So basic attack damage increased to 250% up from 100. Dino Mount basic attack damage, however, has been increased to 275% up from 250, and the basic attack area of effect damage now does 200% damage up from 100%. So to keep in mind that the basic attack is different than your basic attack when you are using your ultimate. So the Clever Snare damage has been increased to 350% up from 200. This is without the mount. However, the Dino Mount Clever Snare damage has been increased to 475 up from 425. This snare already did insane amounts of damage, so that's crazy. All Dino summons have also had damage increased slightly. Their health needs to be increased more than anything, but also the Dino babies are still pretty useless, unfortunately. So now moving on to the Pirate Captain, you Pirate mains are going to be really happy about these changes, let me tell you. So basic attack damage has increased to 200% up from 150, not bad. The first mate, which is going to end up being this little guy right here, is going to end up having its damage increased to 200% up from 100%, and first mate now has increased attack speed when fully upgraded with doubloons. So that's you know, that's its normal attack, but when we fully upgrade this guy, bang 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 bang, like look how often this thing attacks now, dude. That alone, including the damage increase, is going to end up really shooting up the Pirate Captain, dude. So the Pretend Pirate area of effect, so that's that little thing right there, has had its damage increased to 350% up from 250. And then the Ultimate, which already did a lot of damage, by the way, has had its damage increased to 650 up from 600. Crazy, dude. Now moving on to the Revenant, very subtle changes here, but overall they're going to end up being very, very nice. So they ended up making, so the basic attack does 420% damage up from 390. Not as much of a difference as you would think. However, the way that you basically end up playing the Revenant now is you use your Spirit Spears in combination with your basic attack. So the fact that they had our basic attack increased is really, really nice, because frankly speaking, the Rev already did pretty decent damage, more so than you would think. They also increased the Spirit Storm, which is your ultimate, so that it just does overall more damage. They don't end up talking about specifics. I think it's just because it procs a lot more often, like it just triggers more often. So anyways, moving on to the Draco, this is pretty crazy, but they ended up increasing the Spitfire damage, which is your right click. That damage has been increased to 230% up from 200, and the area of effect damage is at 415% up from 400%. Big flipping deal. But the Burnt Offering damage, so this is the actual bomb itself, that has had its damage increased to 500% up from 450%. And the Burning Ward minions, that's these little guys right here, will now deal 100% damage up from 75% damage. So overall, that just made the Draco way stronger. And the Draco, for those of you that don't know, Draco was already a powerhouse. This character has insane amounts of survivability just because of the minions distracting everything all the time. And you can have 6 babies out at a time. And these guys can all end up just doing stacking damage, which it really adds up, right? So the disappointing thing, however, is that the Tomb Raiser, which was very, very much on par with the Draco, I would say, maybe Tomb Raiser was a little bit stronger. That's why I would end up using Tomb Raiser. But generally speaking, the Draco with these changes is probably slightly better than the Tomb Raiser before this patch. But now it's way better than the Tomb Raiser, because the Tomb Raiser actually got nerfed pretty badly. You wouldn't think that it's a big deal, but it is. Let me get into this. So the Skelittles, which is your little skeleton babies here, have had their damage decreased to 200%, down from 225. Now, considering that these guys don't attack too often, that can be a very, very big deal. The Grave Goliath slam damage has been decreased to 1,375%, down from 1,500%. That's such a big deal for this guy to end up being knocked down so many pegs versus the Draco, which just got lifted because of this update. So it really confuses me. If I had to pick Tomb Raider or Draco for the Delves, personally, I would probably end up leaning towards Draco now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Tomb Raider is like useless or anything like that. That's kind of the thing, is they didn't really end up doing that with a lot of the characters across the board, the characters that got nerfed, though it confuses me a little bit. You know, they're not like unusable. So just to keep that in mind with my criticisms, okay? Moving on to the Lunar Lancer, didn't really get that many changes. However, they reduced the knock-up effect of the Lunar form's basic attack, so when you're in your ultimate ability, and they reduced the knockback of the Shadow Lancer class gem minions and made some minor improvements to those minions overall. I wish they would get into details with it, but generally speaking, knockback was pretty much the only, or knock up was probably the only real issue that was still lingering with the Lunar Lancer. So it's good to see that we didn't end up seeing any actual nerfs to the class. In fact, it just made it slightly more efficient, and Lunar Lancer is definitely one of my top 3 in terms of speed farming class. So the Bard has had very, very subtle changes, so we're going to be through this very, very quickly. So fixed an issue with energy on hit effect from the Jubilant Song, only activating for 3 seconds. This effect lasts for 30 seconds. Okay. Anyways, basically you would end up getting some energy on hit from your song, and well, now they end up changing it, so cool. Now, while that ended up covering everything to do with the classes, don't go away, folks, because we still got quite a few significant things to end up talking about, even if they're a little bit more subtle. So, temporary styles. So, instead of taking up inventory space, a new type of collection called temporary styles has been introduced. These can be applied like any other style, but give no mastery and will stop being available after a certain amount of time. Temporary styles will go away during the normal reset time. The PvP and Delve leaderboard banners have been replaced with temporary styles. They can be found under collections, faves and stuff, and now there is the temporary style section right here, and then there would end up being some other subcategories, I suppose, but I don't know. It's leaderboard stuff, so it doesn't really affect most of us. Moving on, there is automatic private delve reset, which quite literally that summarizes it. But if you want all the info, if a player has delved for a long time, so 9+ floors, and then fails to defeat a boss timer, a portal will open to a new, easier delve. This only happens in private delves, and this new delve will not have any special bosses or features of the original delve. It'll just be a private delve with an easier level. The portal will only be open for a short time, but since it's a private delve, you could end up just having one player go through and then he could end up inviting the rest. So whatever, big deal, who cares? Delves update, go burr. But anyways, that's gonna do it for the patch notes today, ladies and gentlemen. I know it was a longer one, but generally speaking, we had a lot to talk about here. Now, the thing that is, you know, I want to be clear, I'm going to end up having individual videos that'll talk about the more significant changes to certain classes. More particularly, I could see myself doing a video on Boomer, Barb, maybe Pirate Captain, Shadow Hunter for sure. Just so that those of you that don't have the time to siphon through like a full-on patch video, will end up having shorter videos that'll end up going into detail, if not more detail, about the specific characters. But I did end up wanting to touch upon absolutely everything that we could in today's video, regardless of the length. Thank you so much for watching. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, and I hope you have a fantastic day. I know I'm going to, because Elden Ring comes out, well, in a few hours.